Hey everybody, this is JD with the Figgy Pop Collector channel. For years, we've actually had a fear of ventriloquist dummies. Yes, those dummies, that are telling jokes about wood and everything like that. Yeah, we've been scared of those for years. And there's actually a name for this, an actual phobia, and that is automatonophobia. I probably just butchered that like crazy, but yeah, that is a real fear of people having of like human-like objects like ventriloquist dummies per se. In film and TV, we can trace this fear back all the way probably back to the 1929 film The Great Gabbo. And over the years, we've had very famous episodes of The Goosebumps, The Twilight Zones, Tales from the Crypt, The Simpsons too, about dummies coming to life. And we never seem to have a shortage of it. Which is leading me to today's discussion, a very, very special episode of Family Matters.
Starting transmission.
Family Matters wasn't a show that was known for its having its Halloween episodes or like traditional Halloween episodes. They would have some here and there, but there are two Halloween episodes of Family Matters that stick out for me greatly. And this is the stories of Stevil. Yes, this is the story of Steve Urkel's killer ventriloquist dummies. And what's really crazy, I thought Stevil was actually really early in the series, but it actually came from the very last two seasons of Family Matters. And that's just crazy to think about. But just kind of catch everybody up on what Family Matters was before we dive into these two episodes. So Family Matters was actually a spin-off of the TV show Perfect Strangers. It was about Harriet, the elevator operator, and her police officer husband, Carl. But what's crazy is that most people remember Family Matters as the Steve Urkel show and not the show about Harriet and Carl. Which is crazy to think about, and just in general too. How much of one character can actually change the trajectory of a TV show forever. But no, that's not what this video is about. That can be a later video where we deep dive into Family Matters. So this leads me to the final two seasons of Family Matters. And in 1997, Family Matters was leaving the TGIF lineup and we moved over to CBS with Step by Step, and they became something called like the CBS Friday Block Party or something like that. And this move, I would say, was probably the very end for a lot of these classic sitcoms because the quality of the show diminished. And as we discuss these two episodes, you'll probably see why I'm saying that, the first episode, Stevil, was very popular, very cast heavy, whereas the second one just wasn't all that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's deep dive into the episodes that surround Stevil. Before I go on, guys, just so you know, there are going to be spoilers for these two episodes, but they are almost 30-year-old episodes, so if you have not watched these Halloween episodes, they are available for streaming right now, wherever you can find Family Matters streaming. So, without further ado, let's get into the first part, Stevil. So this episode was part of Season 8, Episode 7, and this episode premiered on October 25th, 1996. And it's a very basic Halloween episode. The episode begins with Steve actually learning how to become a ventriloquist. He is playing around with the ventriloquist dummies that looks identical to him. He's wearing the same clothes as him, same glasses, everything. It's pretty much a carbon copy of Steve Urkel. And the family is making fun of him and all that stuff. So Steve eventually goes upstairs to go to bed, and he is so tired, and I can't remember exactly why he's tired. I feel like there's a plot point on why he's really tired and exhausted, but honestly, I can't remember what that was. But anyways, so he goes upstairs, falls asleep, and while he's asleep, then we cut into the actual Halloween portion of the episode, and that is a lightning bolt crashing through the window and electrocuting the Steve dummy and bringing it to life. And this dummy actually wants to get rid of the Winslows. So this dummy's plan is to actually get rid of the Winslows, and him and Steve go on the road and have a just really crazy duet where they go to Vegas and all that craziness. But first, the dummy needs to take care of the Winslows and get them out of the picture. Otherwise, Steve can't leave. Which is weird because at this point, I believe Steve is in college. And it's like, come on, guys. Really? You can't get rid of this? You can't go on his own anyways? But that's just me putting logic into this episode. And from here, the Steve dummy ends up giving himself a new name.
From now on, you can just call me Steve-O.
like Evil Steve, Steve, Evil, Stevil. That's where the name comes from. And basically runs out of the room. And from here, we get to some really cool scenes of Stevil actually taking out the Winslow family, which is just crazy to say. First up, he pretends to be Santa Claus, and we get another really. Oh my God, they really make Eddie seem very stupid in this episode. And so Eddie thinks, oh, Santa's here. And he crawls into a chimney and gets sucked up the chimney. It's such a crazy, weird scene. And then Steve shows up, which begs the question: if if Steve sucked Eddie up the chimney, how did Steve get around him? It's very strange, if you ask me. Very, very strange. Anyways, so that happens to Eddie. And then there's Richie and 3J. These are the two kids that the Winslows have adopted in a way because, gotta have more kids in the show. They're actually run down by Steve inside of Steve Urkel's car. And it's very much a Hitchcockian style scene, too, where you have the background, this moving background. They're riding their bikes, and then the car is chasing behind them. It's a really fun homage to like a Hitchcock film. And then Laura ends up being, I guess, chopped up into a bunch of pieces and put in all the cabinets, but she can still move her body parts. Like, her feet still move in one scene, her hands still move in another cabinet. It's really fun. It's really weird. It's like a magician's trick, when they sort the body out and everything like that. That's kind of what they're doing in the scene. So that's what happens to Laura, and she can still talk, and she's angry at Steve, and she wants Steve to actually correct the whatever's going on. And then on the table behind them, we have a giant Jack in the Box. And here's the part where they actually use some green screen to actually put Harriet's head on the actual Jack in the Box dummy. Steve cranks the Jack in the Box, opens up, and it's Harriet, and she's all pissed off and angry at Steve, and she's mad at Steve for doing this to her, basically. And then we have our first fight with Steve right after this scene, where basically Steve comes in, and him and Steve fight, and then Steve throws him into the refrigerator, which of course doesn't last long, and Steve escapes to the living room. Well, Steve Urkel shows up in the living room, and it's in the living room where he sees Carl just sitting down reading a newspaper. And Carl's being kind of weird too. And then it's revealed that Steve had taken over Carl's body and used Carl like a ventriloquist dummy. So this leads to an all-out fight between Steve and Steve, which, it's funny, haha, you see him fighting with the dummy in the background behind the couch, and he's like, and he jumps back and forth and all that fun stuff. So right after all this, Steve actually comes ahead. Steve Urkel's the winner. He rips Steve to pieces, tosses him on the ground, and now Steve is dead. Or so we think. Then all of a sudden, the body parts of Steve start coming back together, and Steve comes back to life. Steve, who didn't leave the house or do anything else, staying there on the chair just relaxing, like relieved that he actually just defeated Steve. Steve is screaming and yelling and like freaked out. It's getting his soul taken out. And then he wakes up from his dream. He goes, oh my goodness, it's all a dream. And then Eddie walks into the room and tells him, hey, what's up, dude? And, they're talking. And Steve's like, oh my God, I just had this scary dream about my dummy coming to life. And then Eddie pulls out a drill and goes, now, Steve, let's dig into that brain of yours and see what's really going on. And we get our first, like, dream scare in Family Matters in the scene. So basically, that first ending was a dream. Steve wakes up screaming. He's like, oh my God, what happened? And he looks at the dummy, and basically, that's kind of where the episode ends. Steve is all happy to be alive, and that all this was a dream. Steve never came to life. And then when the episode wraps up, during the credits scene, we get a lot of the behind the scenes makings of the Steve episode. And that's our episode. That's our first episode and our first introduction to Steve. And it was actually a really fun episode. I actually really do enjoy this episode. It is a fun episode where they took a lot of the characters. There is one person that disappears, and that's Grandma Winslow. We don't know whatever happens to her. She's there, and then she's gone. But we get to see what happens to all the other Winslow family members when Steve comes and attacks. They do it in a fun, creative way. With the cabinets, the Jack in the Box. The special effects are very 90s like 90s TV budget, so you know what that means. But no, this was actually a great episode. And I really do enjoy this one. This is probably one that I remember the most and actually look back on fondly as one of my top episodes of Family Matters. And I don't know. If anybody asks anybody about Family Matters and about any of their Halloween specials, I bet you people that are born around the 90s that watched this when it originally aired will tell you Stevil was probably one of their top favorite episodes. So that leads me to the following year. On December 31st, 1997, Season 9, Episode 7 of Family Matters was Stevil Part 2. He's this time he's not alone. So this is the episode that takes place in the very final season of Family Matters, and you can actually see where there was a lot more budget cuts, a lot more budget stuff going on in this final season. The two main actors are in this whole episode is going to be Carl and Steve. We will get some brief cameos from the other characters too, but they're the main ones. So let's go ahead and we'll just dive on into this episode. So first up, we get the same opening that we got from the previous episode from season 8, and that was the opening sequence with 3J, Richie, and Steve. And Steve's telling him, I'm going to tell you a scary ghost story. So then we cut into the episode where we find out that Steve is staying home and doing candy. He's not going out trick-or-treating, and he's drinking a lot of coffee because he wants to stay awake all Halloween. So he doesn't have any more nightmares about Steve. And we do find out that after the last Halloween, he chopped up Steve into a bunch of pieces and flushed him down the toilet. Anyways, so there's that going on. And we get quick cameos of Laura and Eddie leaving for parties. And that's pretty much it. We don't see Harriet in this episode. Carl comes home and he says he's going to go upstairs, take a nap. He has a long day at work, so he's going to go to sleep. And he goes upstairs. And Steve ends up staying downstairs, watching TV and drinking coffee or whatever he's drinking to stay awake. So then Carl goes upstairs and he takes some medication to go to sleep and falls fast asleep. And this is where we enter the dream sequence in this one. So Carl wakes up from his dream and goes downstairs and he finds a giant box in the living room. And he opens it and there's a ventriloquist dummy of himself in there. And he starts playing with it, and that's when Steve comes in the room and goes, Big man, what are you doing here? What is that? And he goes, well, somebody sent me this gift. And then the front door kicks wide open and it's Stevil. He's there. He came back. And he brings the Carl dummy to life, who decides to give himself the nickname Carlsbad, which is, oh, that's what I mean. This is just bad. And then we find out that Stevil and Carlsbad want to put their soul into the bodies of Carl and Steve and go to Vegas and do a two-man show. That is their whole plan. So basically the rest of the episode is Stevil and Carlsbad chasing them around the house. Eventually Steve and Carl lock themselves in their bedroom and they get a really shining moment where Carlsbad goes, "It's me, Carlsbad," or or is it Steve who does that? Anyways, one of them does that, and and then we get Steve getting captured by Stevil, and their souls being swapped, and now Steve Urkel's evil, and Carl doesn't know this, and Carl grabs Steve and pulls him along and goes, "Come on, Steve, we gotta go," and Stevil and Steve's body stops Carl and starts stealing the soul of Carl. Yeah, I told you. Not a very good episode from your understanding. We're almost done. We're almost to the end. Basically, Carl wakes up from his dream and he's like, oh my god, that was freaky. We don't get any fake outs, unfortunately. I would like a little fake out. That'd be really funny here at this moment. And that's it. Basically, Carl apologizes to Steve, says, I'm sorry, didn't believe you. I just had an evil dream about Steve coming back, and he had a dummy of himself called Carlsbad, and this and that. And it's just, they're like, oh, big man, I'm so sorry. They hug it out, and then happily ever after. And then we do get an epilogue at this episode, and it ends of Carlsbad and Steve Vegas dancing and doing a whole routine, and everybody booing them off stage. And that ends the Great Stevil 2 episodes of Family Matters. As you can see, this is not one of my favorite episodes. I have the most problems with this episode of the Stevil 2 parts, and it really sucks because I do like the first episode a lot. But this one just felt just rushed and just a gimmick, I would have loved to see more of Carlsbad. I would have loved to see more of Stevil in this episode, but I know there were limitations. There were probably budget limitations. We didn't actually see him take out and the rest of Winslow family, which would have been really funny to see Carlsbad do that. But and then the ending was some weird tacky send off of some weird joke they make about they want to go on the road and become stars. It's just so bad. But no, it's so crazy and so bad. I don't even know what to say. But no, and these two episodes are part of my formative years growing up, and they're most memorable episodes of Family Matters for me. And it's crazy to think that they were part of the last two seasons. In hindsight, I guess is not really crazy because the last two seasons were really, really crazy in Family Matters. So these actually fit in really well with that. But the last two seasons are probably one of my favorites too, which is just crazy to think about. So what about you guys? Have you ever seen the Stevil episodes? Are they some of your favorite? Do you remember this for Family Matters? Or are you gonna go back right now and go watch them online and watch those two episodes and go, whoa, Stevil Part 1, very dark and creepy. Stevil Part 2, uh, just pass. But no. Like I said, these are two of my favorite all time Halloween episodes of the Family Matter franchise. If you would like me to go ahead and review any more TV show Halloween franchises or special episodes of TV shows, let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to do that for you guys because I don't think people talk much about the 90s TV shows, especially the sitcoms that were around the TGIF and CBS Block Party. And there's some crazy episodes during those shows. But, anyways, thank you guys for joining me on this little journey of reminiscing about one of my favorite episodes of television and part of my favorite Family Matter episodes. And I hope you guys did enjoy it. Let me know in the comments down below. And remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video is posted. And until next time, guys, this is JD with the Figgy Pop Collector channel.
That concludes a Figgy Pop transmission.
Automatonophobia. 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 Auto. Yes, the ventriloquist